So I think your question about the additional public comment. So this is public comment, presumably directed specifically at the Watmough edition. So I think rather than put it at the front of the meeting, we'll let the public listen to the summary presentation, some of the other bullet points, and then take public comment. Depending on how much interest there is, my intention is not to cut anybody off, but we have received quite a bit of public comment. So I'll probably be looking for people who have not submitted something in writing or have not been at a meeting where they've made some public comment. I would be looking for people who have not done either one of those to start that section, and then see where we go. So I think Aaron's opening up his party at the parks. Aaron, can you mute yourself over there?
I can hear you. I'm sorry, I had to step out to help find people trying to access the building. Sure,
that's fine. If you could just mute then once you're settled, that would be great. And the other thing is Mike Pickett will not be attending the meeting as commissioner. It's unlikely. He's in St. Louis, so he is going to attempt to do that. And Peggy's been trying to reach Marilyn. She wasn't sure.
I just called her. So she's trying to join the meeting, but she is over on the east side. So, and she did send you an email this morning, Lincoln.
Oh, she did. Okay.
So she should be joining us soon.
Okay, great. All right, well then, I think that kind of takes care of all the housekeeping. So greetings and happy Friday to everybody that's on the call. Good to see either your faces or your names. We're going to proceed through this special meeting of the Land Bank, which the focus is the Watmough Edition property. So we won't be conducting any other business other than that today. So we're going to jump right into it with Lincoln's director's report. He's going to give us a summary of the project to date and then go over some of the options that we have facing us.
All right, thank you, Krista. I'm probably going to share my screen in a minute, but I'm also in charge of admitting everyone to the meeting. So it's probably going to be a little scattered, but I think I can start without, well, actually, I am going to share my screen because I want to do the land acknowledgement. So we'll see how this goes. No, that's not. Hang on 1 second. Oh. Okay. Can you all see that? Yes?
Yes.
Great.
Yes.
All right. Thank you. Sorry, I was confused for a minute going from Teams share to Zoom share. I now remember how to do it. Okay, so first thing, we want to start with a land acknowledgement that we reside on and care for the ancestral lands and waters of the Coast Salish people who have stewarded and called this place home since time immemorial, and we honor inherent Aboriginal and treaty rights that have been passed down from generation to generation. Okay, what we're here to talk about is this property again, the Watmough Edition property, as we're calling it, also referred to as Watmough Head, and also has a Samish place name attached to it, which I will not try and pronounce. You can look at that up on the Samish website if you wish. They have a pronunciation guide, but obviously a really important piece of property from many different perspectives. I am putting this up here just as a brief background. I'm not going to go through the same presentation I did about a month ago, but I'll just give you a brief overview, and then we'll go into just a summary of public comments that have been received, and talk through all of that a bit. So the acquisition history of this property, in mid 2021, we became aware that the property was on the market, owned at that point by the Higgins family, and negotiated with them for quite a long stretch there, and eventually closed on the property in 2022 on February 1st, with a purchase price of 2.55 million. We did this with a potential for a resale to the Bureau of Land Management, to be part of the national monument. And I think it's important to note that when the land bank purchases property, it's clear up front when we do a project summary, whether there is a resale provision or not. Quite often there is no resale provision, but when there is one, it's specified what it might be. In some cases, it could be resale of a property with a conservation easement, if we think that can retain the conservation values of a property. In this case, the reservation was to be able to resell the property to BLM at a later date. So moving forward, when we were talking about that, when we were doing the acquisition, there were a number of questions raised about the Bureau of Land Management, I think in relation to the resource management plan and comments that people had submitted, which caused there were just a lot of questions about whether people thought that was the right way to go, right course of action. So we went out and secured grant funding really as a backup, and have this grant funding in hand, about $1.5 million. And one of the reasons for this meeting and this special meeting, again, is because we've basically come to the end of the period for those grants where we have to decide whether we're going to accept the grants and retain the property, or whether we're going to go forward with this idea of resale to the BLM. A couple other slides and I'll stop sharing. Brian had asked me to put this context map up so that people can see exactly where the property is in relation to existing land bank holdings and also national monument holdings. So as you can see, the land bank is in green there. National monument is in that brownish color. The access to our property, not Watmough Head currently, but our property that we've held since 2007, is via the Watmough parking area, which is on BLM property. So this is just another shot to give you a sense of where our access would come through, and how we would do it. So this is the parking area at Watmough currently. This is an existing trail which comes through our property and kind of ends here. And what we would be doing is continuing this onto the Watmough Head property. All of this, as you see here, is part of the ownership of that new property. This is not, in fact, an easement. It's just a panhandle parcel attached to this one. So this is just a shot of that existing trailhead area, Watmough Beach. So you can see how this would all work. And I'm going to stop sharing unless people have questions. Okay. Go back to the meeting here. I don't see anyone else in the waiting room. And did I successfully stop sharing my screen? Yes, good. Okay, excellent. All right, so the question today for the commission, after hearing a lot of public comment and discussing this project for a long time now, is really the issue of whether the commission wants to retain ownership of the property or whether they want to recommend to the council a resale to the Bureau of Land Management. And that is the only way a property can be sold. Once the land bank takes ownership, the commission would have to recommend to the council a resale of the property. If the commission does not do that, no additional action is necessary. We would just go forward with the grant agreements and work our way through that process. So what does it mean? Financial considerations that we're talking about here are significant without a doubt. There's the purchase price that we had to pay to get the property. And there are also there will be management costs without a doubt attached to this property, particularly with regard to retaining the historic cabin on site, but also just setting up public access to the property, doing interpretation, making sure that whatever public access happens is done in as respectful a manner as possible, given the large midden that's on the property. And just we would have additional requirements to keep on top of the visitation down there if we held on to the property. If we resold the property, we would recover the purchase price. BLM would pay market value for the property. If we retain it, we'll get the grant funding, which would mean we still will have spent about $1 million on the acquisition, plus everything else. I think we've been over these numbers a number of times, so I don't think I need to belabor it. If anyone has questions, feel free to ask. So those are the financial considerations. We've received quite a bit of public comment on this question, including at a special meeting on Lopez about a month ago, where we heard from a number of members of the community. And I think the opinion was fairly unanimous at that meeting, with the community feeling like they were much more comfortable retaining local control over the property than wanting to resell to BLM. And I would say there are a number of issues and a number of reasons for that. I don't think I need to get into the weeds here, but I do think people are comfortable with land bank ownership. They've seen what we've done on other preserves and feel confident that we could manage the property well. I don't want any of this to be perceived as a slight against BLM management. They have been great partners to us and have a huge job to do without a doubt, given the 1,000 acres that they have to manage. But what we have heard from the community is this preference for retaining local control over this property. We've also had some feedback as initiated by Bree Chartier, the monument manager, from some of the tribes in the area. And she put out a question basically asking whether they were comfortable or what their preference was for the land bank retaining the property or reselling it to the BLM. And the tribes pretty unanimously have stated that they're more comfortable with BLM owning the property, which is understandable. I think they all have a relationship with the Bureau of Land Management, and so that's kind of their comfort level And they want to be confident that whoever manages the property will honor their treaty rights, which of course we would as well, without a doubt. But that's where their relationship has been, so it kind of makes sense that the tribes would be more comfortable with BLM. I don't think this is a big controversial issue in any way whatsoever, because the property, the main issue here is that the property has been protected and will remain protected going forward, regardless of who owns it. And that's really the fundamental thing here. The option was for it to be sold to a private buyer who would have developed the property, almost certainly would have taken the existing cabin down and built a much larger structure and closed off access for everyone. So we averted that, and I think are in a really good position just to go forward here and manage the property and do it in as inclusive way as possible. So that's what I would see if we were to retain ownership of the property. I don't know that I have a whole lot more. This is back to Krista's point about whether if we arrived at this stage early, what we would do, but I mean, I'm just going to take questions from you all, and then I think we can go into public comment.
So I had mentioned to Lincoln before the meeting started, the question was whether we needed to wait until 10:40, because that's where public comment stands on the agenda. We didn't think that would be a problem, but miracles happen. And so here we are, finished 20 minutes before that time. What we could do is, I would be willing to open it up for commission discussion and questions to Lincoln until we hit the 10:40 mark. And then see if there are any people in the public that have joined us that want to speak, anyone that's here now or anyone that joins around 10:40. And if there isn't anyone, or if we allow those comments, then we would go back to discussion and move towards the action item. How does that sound? Or is the commission comfortable with going ahead and having their questions to Lincoln and discussion at this point? It doesn't mean we're not going to we're going to disregard the comments that come in later from the public, but we can at least get the ball rolling on any discussion that the commission wants to have. You're muted, Brian, and
trying to unmute. Okay, Krista, my thought is that if we open for public comment now, we will still be open at 10:40, and that's the critical thing, is to allow public comment through. So I would vote for allowing public comment at this point, unless public or commissioners have questions about Lincoln's report.
okay, if everybody else is comfortable with that, just wave at me. Sandy, Peggy, Amy, does that all sound good? Okay, that sounds great. Well, then I'm happy to open it up to members of the public that are here. I would ask that you do hit your raised hand button, because I think Zoom will put you up at the top of the page in the order that you click on that little button. So Rhea Miller is the first one, and feel free to, you don't have to do it all at this right now, but that's what I would like to see. Okay, Rhea, you are first up.
Thank you. First of all, I want to express my support for whatever the commission decision is. This is an incredibly complicated decision that I have a lot of respect for. So I am just so very grateful that this land has been taken out of development. So thank you for that. I have learned some more information, and I would love to be corrected if any of my information is wrong. I understand if we take the grants, one of the grants demands that the cabin be removed, And the other grant says things like kayaks, canoes, dinghies must be allowed to land on the beaches. I'm not making any judgment on that right now. I just want to say, I think that's important to take into consideration. I also understand that the land bank gets financially strapped if we don't go with BLM. If BLM gets the land, then the cabin will be removed and the tribes will be brought in for involvement, including perhaps some co-management, and perhaps the land bank could still have co-management, I don't know. This is a unique opportunity for the tribes, as it would be government to government. And as a person who was the tribal liaison during my time as a commissioner, I know what standing a county has compared to a government of the United States with tribes. So it's an amazing opportunity, and the land bank just simply doesn't have that standing. And also, I have to keep in mind that the BLM right now is always and has been under the auspices of the Secretary of Interior, and for the first time, we have a Native person who is the head, is the Secretary of the Interior. And I was also told that the charter was written in such a way that none of the lands can be taken back away if the BLM gets it. At any rate, I know the condition of the cabin is extremely fragile. It can't be moved. It has no foundation. It's been added on to multiple times, contains lead paint. And I've also heard that the septic system is on a burial ground. All those things make your decision extremely complicated. In my heart of hearts, I would love for the land bank to keep this property. But again, I just want to say I do respect whatever your decision is. Thank you.
Thank you, Ria. Steve Snowden?
Yes, thank you. I was curious, did you elaborate on, I'm assuming if you maintain the property in the land bank that you'll do similar, what you've done at other properties and sell a conservation easement to the San Juan Preservation Trust. Could you elaborate on what might be in that conservation easement? What will it allow and what will it not allow if the land bank continues ownership?
Krista, do you want me to respond to that?
Yes, please.
Well, actually, Steve, no, we would not be reselling a conservation easement to the Preservation Trust in this case. We do that when we're working directly with them on particular projects and we're combining resources to stretch our dollars further. In this case, the Preservation Trust is actually not involved. And that's another reason we sought grant funding. And for one of the grants received, actually, the Preservation Trust is not eligible to participate in this project. So we wouldn't have a conservation easement on the property. However, when you accept grants from the state, we have two potential grants, one from the Aquatic Lands Enhancement Account and the other from salmon recovery funds. You basically are required to sign a deed of right to the state, which requires you basically to manage the property for what you applied for the grant to do. And in this case, the primary goal of those grants is to protect the property from development, protect the shoreline. There is also a public access component, and I can answer Ria's question about that. No, there's no actual requirement that that landings be allowed. We've talked about the potential for that, but the reality is, we would go through our management planning process and come up with what we think is the most appropriate way for people to access the property and really try and figure out what the best controls are. Obviously, our primary concern here is protection of the resource. Public access is a secondary issue. It's still important, but we're only going to offer that as long as we can protect the resource. To Ria's other question about one of the grants not allowing the house, that's actually true. But our way around this is to basically cut out the area where there are structures from the grant. We'd still be extinguishing any development rights in the property. So the structures that would be retained, including the cabin, would not be allowable as a residence, but we would not have to tear the cabin down, not have to get rid of it. And this is in contrast to BLM, where it's been really clear that for them to go forward with a purchase, they would need the cabin removed. In the past couple of conversations, we've heard from Bree Chartier that maybe there could be a reconsideration on that point, but I don't have anything further than that. So I kind of have to go with what I've heard from the district manager up to this point, which said the cabin would really have to go.
Thank you. Tom and or Sally. Tom, Reeve.
Yeah, sorry about the lighting. The sun actually came out today.
Mhm.
I want to just make a point. This particular one isn't a question so much, that should the land bank maintain ownership of the property, this is an amazing opportunity for the land bank to help build bridges between the tribes and the Lopez Island community and the broader community that visits that area. I think that there's good to be had on all sides of building those bridges. And I would hope that the land bank would take that opportunity seriously and really advance the relationship between the tribes and the non-tribal visitors to the area. I do have a question for Lincoln, which is a little nerdly, but I've never figured this out in the past. I know when the land bank acquires property, they try to spend their money proportionally to the districts from which the revenue was accrued. And I'm wondering, when you get grant funds back on property, such as this, such as Channel Preserve, et cetera, does that in essence get credited back to the district where the lands were acquired? Or does that go into just a general allocation?
Well, that's a great question, Tom. I think the commission struggled with this issue of spending the funds from the district where they're generated and how that relates to grant funding and all the rest. And really, what we try and do is just break it down by looking at the REIT revenue and where those funds have been spent. We typically don't have an accounting procedure to factor in grants or partnerships or anything else. So that's a good question. Maybe something that we could do a bit more analysis on. But in general, we're just looking at the REIT funding. And I think the way that plays out, honestly, when you look across the islands, is that the commission's looking at individual projects. And really, if there are great opportunities, regardless of what district that it happens to be in, the commission is open to pursuing those opportunities. So that balancing of spending money where it's raised in terms of REIT revenue is one thing, but it's what you strive for. It's not a hard and fast requirement as part of the program. In fact, the language is strive to, basically. So it's a goal of the commission. But I also think it's really important that that goal doesn't inhibit our ability to pursue really amazing projects even though one district may be overcommitted at some point in time.
Yeah, I'd like to add to that I think maybe it's 10 years or whatever, the many years that I've been on the commission so far. I have to say that I have not felt like funds are attributed to islands or districts based on how much revenue they bring in. I think we do look for the projects and the quality of the projects themselves and how they fit into our goals or long-range planning. Lopez is not mighty in the revenue that it brings in, but it is mighty in the properties that it's had come available and its incredible support for the land bank. And I think that is appreciated by the commission. So I'm really very comfortable and happy with the way revenues have been distributed over the years that I've been on this commission. And so Karen Holm has a question, but she can't figure out how to raise her hand. So I'm going to acknowledge her and see if she can get unmuted and join us.
Let's see if I can get I don't know how to do my photo either. You'd think I'd know how to do this. I taught for 2 years. Hi, thank you. I really appreciate all you guys have been doing and the thought process that's gone through over, I don't know, the last couple of years. I'm wondering, because we've had a chance to hear, at least I've had a chance to hear a sense of what the BLM, what the land bank thinks and the process of giving comment and you guys taking that into consideration on making your decisions. And I really respect the idea of nation to nation of the tribes feeling comfortable with working with BLM when the land bank is pretty young and hasn't maybe established those kinds of things. My question is there someone who can speak to what it would look like if the BLM purchased this property and how their management would be? Because from my perspective, I have no idea what that could look like. And I'm curious if there's someone that can speak to that here or what that input possibilities are from community members and tribes to the BLM if they did take ownership.
Is it Owen? Is he at the Parks building? And
Yes.
are you, can you speak to that?
You're good.
Briefly, yeah. Where's our microphone?
It's
in there. Okay,
Yep.
Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Briefly, I think you all know that I am new here and Bree, of course, is not here today. I will say that Bree, I think, discussed a fair amount of what our thoughts have been at the previous meeting, September 15th, I believe, about 2 weeks ago, which was recorded, so that is available. And then, with any land that we acquire, this or otherwise, it goes into our general planning process, which I think a lot of you have been involved with or peripheral to over the last couple of years. So each of the sites, the properties that we own falls under our main recreation management plan, which is the document that was finalized this past year, involving a ton of public input, public comment, working with all of our partners, including the tribes, to figure out what do people want and what's going to fit the sort of the biggest bucket of those desires. And then our recreation sites, including Watmough, for instance, Iceberg, Point Colville, go through a smaller scale planning process, which involves also a lot of public comment, legal requirements, tribal consultation, all the same steps, just at a smaller scale for that specific property. So I can't tell you specifically what the BLM would like to do with Watmough Head because that's not my call personally, and also because so much of our process involves really significant public input and public comment that it's very hard to say at the early stages what we would want to do because that depends on what you want and what everybody else wants as well.
Does that answer your question, Karen? I think in terms of what the process is, there is a ton of process.
That's great. One of my I don't want to say concerns, but is thinking about access. And I know the land bank has talked about having that access from Watmough as a walking trail. And I'm curious about that. As my family is part of that area and have been stewards of some of that Watmough Head for a number of years, and recognize the challenges for access. And I'm just curious, like I said, the land bank seems to have a pretty clear idea of what they would do, and I'm wondering about BLM. I guess that is part of my question.
I think the statement that Bree made at the September 15th meeting, she listed a number of points there, and the one about access and how they would approach access. I just rewatched that presentation, and her comment was that the current plan or the draft thoughts that we have as a land bank would kind of line up with what she is thinking BLM would do too, in terms of access points and things like that. So that's that I can say.
Thank you.
Any other questions from anybody? Oh, and look at us, we're at 10:40. You guys are great. And is there anyone else in the waiting room, Lincoln?
No one in the waiting room, but Sally Reeve has her hand up.
Yes, I saw that. Go ahead, Sally.
So a question, and Owen, thank you for being present in this meeting, but I don't think you can probably speak to this. If you can, great. Or maybe the land bank knows this. Has BLM put this property on their LWCF funding list?
I don't know.
Could you define LWCF for those on the call that don't know what that stands for?
BLM would be using land, water, and conservation funds to purchase this property, and it is a multi-year, several-year process for these funds, not all of which are approved. And I'm just wondering, has there been a commitment from BLM to obtain this funding for the project?
I don't know where we're at in that process. I'm not sure.
Yeah. And then has the land bank considered any private fundraising to take away some of the strain that this property's purchase would place on the land bank?
We have not considered private fundraising up to this point. And I think part of the reason for that is since we do so many projects with San Juan Preservation Trust, and since they're very much, that's their bailiwick, trying to raise private funds, and we focus on public funds. So it's something that's not out of the question. It's not something that we've really talked about a whole lot with regard to this property.
Okay, thanks.
We did do it for the channel property in terms of getting a commitment from the community and their interest. So it is done. It has been done in the past. Thanks, Sally. Wendy Mickle.
Hello. I submitted an email with my thoughts on the property, but there are a couple of other points that I didn't make in that email that I'd like to speak about now. The BLM has talked about using the site for a longhouse, that the beach is wonderful for canoe landings, and it would be a tribal meeting place because there's water and sanitation there. But these seem to counter the access via private road, because I'm quite sure that if it's a meeting place that they will not be carrying supplies in on that trail. And the beaches have been noted for being salmon habitat. And one of the reasons that there was supposed to be reduced public use there. And canoe landing on the beaches sounds to me counterproductive with preserving salmon habitat. So I just wanted to point out these things that don't seem to agree with each other, because I haven't heard anybody else mention them. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you. Anybody else with any public comment or question? All right. Hearing none, I'm going to move us into just general commission discussion of this project. So now's our chance to ask any clarifying questions of Lincoln or respond to anything you may have heard or what have you. Oh, Breton Carter. Breton, would you like to make a public comment?
It's actually Amy. We're at the museum. Hi, surprise. Yeah, I guess all I wanted to say was that the museum is still committed to trying to help with preserving the house if that becomes part of what whoever ends up with the property desires to do. I think personally what I want to say, which is not necessarily coming from the Historical Society, but just that I do think it's really important that we consider what the tribes want and access for the tribes. I think I agree with Lincoln that we're winning here no matter what. You know, the property has been preserved, and I think everybody who's involved is committed to that idea. And I just want to say that I feel like this has been a really complicated process for you, and I wanted to echo Rhea and say that, you know, I support whatever decision you guys make. This has been super complicated, and I really appreciate all of the thought and effort that has gone into listening to what everybody has to say. So that's it. Colleagues, anything to say? Okay, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. And if you could mute yourself there, thank you. Okay, last chance, everybody. Any other public comment? If you think you want to say something, now's the time. Okay, back to commission discussion. So I'm just going to open it up, and if it gets out of control, you'll have to raise your hand, but I'm open to having anyone speak if they have a question for Lincoln or want to express concern, whatever. This is our time to share with each other the thoughts we've had about this project and how we've come to feel the way we feel today, whatever. So let's have some of that, and then we will see if we can move to an action item. Who wants to go first? Brian.
And I
Since you
didn't.
unmuted yourself first, I'm going to give it to you.
Well, Krista, I don't have any questions at this point. I think Lincoln has answered them very well. So I guess you're asking for commission reaction and intention?
Sure, we could do that without, yeah.
Well, why don't I yield to other commissioners to see if they have any questions or additional comments first? How about that?
That sounds good. Are there any questions coming from commissioners? Peggy.
I have a question, and it's perfect that Amy just spoke right before. And we might not know the answer to this question yet, but my question has to do with the Chadwick House. And the Lopez Historic Society has indicated their interest in helping to retain that structure in some way or another. And that's a complex undertaking, and I really appreciate their effort to kind of come to the table and help us with that. So I'm curious about what kind of timeline we're talking about in terms of understanding that the level of commitment there and how we can kind of tie that into our decisions. I mean, we've heard loud and clear from the community that protecting that building is of utmost importance. so I'm just curious to hear about whether you have a sense of timeline on understanding more about what your partnership might be in that regard.
You're asking me, Peggy.
Yes, I am.
We have not discussed that further. I did have a conversation with Chris at Washington Heritage Preservation Trust. I can never put all their words together properly. About what some different options might be. I do know that for the capital heritage grants, we would need if the museum was taking on getting grants to preserve the building, then we would need to lease the building for about 16 years in order to get that money. So that's a complication for anybody. What the timeline might be, I feel like that it's going to be probably a conversation that I don't really have an answer to yet. I mean, we're willing to sort of like get our feet wet and start looking at all of it. But I think Heritage Capital Grants, I do know, are on a 2-year cycle. It's coming up next spring. I don't know that gives us enough lead time to figure out everything that would need to happen. And also the other thing is it's a 2-to-1 match. So we have to raise 2/3 of the money. It can be in kind, it could be a donation potentially. He mentioned a donation of that part of the property. I don't know because then we could use that as a match. I don't know that that's something that the board is willing to take on. I mean, those are some pretty big conversations that would need to happen. Yeah, and I do think I am somewhat concerned still that it's not clear if the BLM is going to require the removal of the house for the sale. That to me, that is them sort of doing an end run around what would then be their responsibilities for the house. If they were just require it to be removed, then they don't have to go through their process of dealing with the house. I think there's a huge question I think that there will be probably a multi-year process of consultation with the tribes about what they feel should happen to it. I know that some of the tribes were contacted about their preferences. I'm not sure if the Jamestown Slalom and the Samish are included in that. I think, what's her name? Adelia. Adelia Chadwick was Jamestown Slalom. So I feel like I'd be curious to know how they feel about the house. I think that the Midden is, probably Coast Salish more generally. I think a lot of people have probably used that property, but I do know that the Samish have some traditional use ties to it. So I feel like the question of whether or not the house should remain is actually still quite unclear until we have quite a bit more information. Yeah. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, just point of clarification. The letter that went out to the tribes didn't ask them to comment on the house itself. It was just a question of ownership. And so none of the tribes have expressed any opinion one way or the other on the house itself. We haven't heard anything. The Samish did respond. I don't know. I know the letter went out to the Jamestown's column, among others. I don't think anything was received back from them specifically. Owen may be better able to answer that question. But the Samish did weigh in on it.
I am curious too. I mean, I don't even know, honestly, if Jamestown Slalom are aware of the fact that Adelia lived there for basically her whole adult life. And that she is, so that, anyway, yeah, thanks for that clarification.
Thanks, Amy. Peggy, any other questions or comments? Asha, you're going to need to wait now until we're finished our commission discussion. you don't mind. Thank you. Marilyn, do you have any questions for Lincoln, clarifying?
No questions. Thank you, Krista.
Amy?
It looked like Sandy had her hand up, so.
Oh, I'm sorry, Sandy. I saw you in the upper corner and then I started looking around. I'm sorry. Apologies. Go ahead, Sandy.
This is a question for Lincoln. If he could speak on behalf of staff, I'd be interested to hear if Lincoln feels that we have staff capacity and I can't think of the word I'm thinking of, but basically we held the meeting with several tribal members and we made some adjustments in our management plan wording, and it feels that we're moving towards wanting to forge more of a relationship between the land bank and tribes. We haven't quite known how to go about doing that. And so I'm wondering, Lincoln, can you speak to, do you have any hesitations on how the land bank could interact with the tribes on this property? In other words, the tribal statements that I saw that came in were specific to preferring government to government for the reason of respecting rights. And so I'm wondering how you're feeling, Lincoln, about our ability to fulfill that role. And does that make sense?
Yeah, sure. That's good. You're about as I've been I think less articulate than you today, so that's perfectly clear to me. I would say there are a couple of questions that you're asking. One is about staff capacity for managing the property. And that's definitely going to be a challenge. There's no question. Amanda Weedo is our only person on Lopez, and we've got a number of preserves, and she divides her time between those. So this will be something else to be on her plate. And if she wants to comment, that's great. I think as far as interacting with the tribes and forging partnerships with the tribes, that's really a new opportunity for us, and it's a new opportunity for the county in general. So I would say, we would proceed in conjunction with the rest of the county in trying to forge those relationships. We're still really at the beginning of that process, not just for the land bank, but for the county in general. And I think there's a big appetite for pursuing that and really exploring what we can do together and how we can do joint projects and a whole variety of things. But it's going to take a lot of consultation, a lot of conversation, a lot of listening for us to really come to some conclusive points in that process. But I do feel like we're certainly committed, and I think the county is generally also quite committed to that process. And I note that Frankie Robertson is on the call. We had a conversation yesterday. She is the county's tribal liaison. So Frankie, I don't know if you want to comment now or not, but I would say, as an entity, the county is really committed to trying to build some good relationships with the tribes.
So that answers one of my questions. I saw Francis Robertson, but I wasn't sure if that was Frankie. We haven't met yet, but I just like to speak, just jump in here quickly. And then Frankie, I would like to hear from you, because this is one of the points I struggled with the most on this property is our capacity and ability to work with the tribes. And so over the past couple of days, I've been looking through the county website and looking at various things that are being done. And Frankie and Kendra with our environmental stewardship department, I guess you call it a department, have been laying the groundwork over the past couple years, trying to get at least some staff. I think Peter joined in one of the sessions. There were some workshops back in early COVID that are online. You can watch them. And I think they have done some subsequent ones where they are meeting with various people from various tribes and having open discussions and educational conversations, really, I think, to get the county educated and familiar with both the legal requirements, the historical deals that have gone down, what's kind of overseeing interactions with tribes now, plus just hearing really heartfelt stories from these various people. And I think as a land bank, we're not government. And so as we go forward with some of these relationships, it's my understanding, I think I'm getting from this, that we would be working directly with county representatives, and we'll be in conjunction with them on any of these discussions, because they will represent what government we have will have to come directly from the county and not from us. But in watching the responses from some of these workshops, the various people coming from various tribes have all expressed a real appreciation for San Juan County stepping forward. It was repeatedly said that the county's ahead of the ball in many ways, just reaching out and trying to forge the relationships and understand the complexities, and that they are appreciative of that. So I think our county people have been doing some legwork for us prior to us even looking at this property. So that has lessened some of the questions and fears that I had about this. Frankie, how do you feel about this?
Morning, everyone. I wasn't expecting to actually talk this morning. Anyway, yeah, I'm not sure that I would call myself the county's tribal liaison quite yet, but I think that's the direction that we're working towards. As Krista mentioned, we do have these recordings on our website, and I'll put the link in the chat for you all, and I do highly encourage you to check those out. We conducted those in 2020. I can also share that we have just signed a contract with the Watmough Group, and we'll be offering a countywide for project managers, department heads, and anyone who's working directly with tribes. So a training in tribal relations in early January. So this is kind of what we're working towards, and working with the Watmough Group to really figure out the strategies going forward to building and understanding what engagement means to each of the different tribes that have UNA and cultural ties to the San Juan Islands. I'm coming at it very much from a marine perspective. I'm the county's marine biologist, but working very closely in partnership with the land bank so that we are also addressing the land-based concerns too. So I think it's very early days still. We are slowly working along in this direction though, to build those meaningful partnerships with the tribes in this area.
Thank you. Amy, did you have any questions or for Lincoln or clarifying comments?
Thanks, Krista, and thanks, Sandy, for your really great questions. It certainly some things that I was interested in. I think, you know, this sort of tension here, right, is we want to, as the county's land bank, we want to honor and respect to the greatest extent possible the local community's perspective and desires, right? But I also look at the treaty tribes that weighed in, including the letter that came in from Tulalip tribes. And as has been said before, like, as the Swinomish Tribe's environmental policy director, I fully understand what they're talking about. And I guess I just wonder, is it possible if the county were to retain ownership that it could potentially include some sort of condition that the county is committed to engaging in an MOA with appropriate, tribal governments to create a process for, future sort of management and stewardship of this, a sort of, right, so there's a joint secretarial order that is the U.S. Department of Agriculture, now NOAA Fisheries signed on, and of course the Department of Interior. And it's all about urging, the concept of co-stewardship agreements forward. And so I guess if there's a question is that something that, we as commissioners could sort of commit, basically, we would be essentially committing the county, because this is to the extent there would be a government to government relationship, as Krista, you rightly pointed out, it would be between the county government and the tribal nations. That would be a long, involved process. Presumably there would, whether it's the Whitener group or some other group to facilitate it. But it seems like, given that the commission just, we had this really great panel discussion and meeting, expressed, this really forward momentum and a really, I think, respectful and again, welcome way. And then we have this sort of decision here. And so in trying to thread the needle, it seems like from my perspective, that would be a really important component to consider. In what way could we add in this sort of commitment and sort of guarantee that going forward, if the county were to retain, which it sounds like there's this overwhelming sense of the community that's the preference, but that we could also find a way to really honor and respect this perspective and these sort of desires of the tribes that have weighed in. So that's sort of my question, is like, that's something that, again, as the land bank, we could sort of essentially commit the county to do as part of this process. And I don't know that we can, but something along those lines seems like it would be really important if that's where the commission were to go. Thanks.
Lincoln.
Yeah, that's a great comment, Amy. And I don't know that any commitment can be made along those lines, but certainly I think the county is very interested in this. And I've had conversations both with our liaison, Christine, and who is on this in this meeting today, and also Jane Fuller. And I think both of them expressed a strong desire to hear from us following this meeting and to talk about what comes after. So that's certainly something that we could put on the table for them to think about as a council.
Yeah, I would agree with that. We can't bind the county to anything, but we can certainly have that conversation. And I think there is interest and support in doing something that wouldn't be as technical or as legally binding as the government to government agreement, but in terms of the spirit of the relationships, I think my sense is our county is supportive of that, and we can have that discussion with council to see what they could do to put something down that gives reassurance to the tribes that we're committed to starting this process with them and having them actively involved. So thanks for that. It's a good question. Brian.
It strikes me that discussion is putting the cart before the horse. Mm-hmm. One of the things that about the land bank versus the BLM in this situation is that we're really on the cutting edge of this. We're on the cutting edge with the county I think in most situations, because we are the agency of the county, which is concerned not only with resource preservation or natural resource preservation, but also cultural resource preservation. So I think that the land bank will be in most cases the first agency to meet the road in most of the situations that involve tribal resources. And it seems to me that this very case, the Watmough addition, is an instance where we can do that, and where we will have and should have the flexibility to deal with the tribes and invite the tribes and work with them on specific issues. So I think that going for an umbrella agreement via the county is really broadening the issue and complicating the issue in a way that'll be counterproductive. I'm not saying that shouldn't happen, but we're the cutting edge of this, and I think that it should happen in an actual case through our openness and our actual invitation to and work with tribal people.
Thank you. Peggy.
So Amy, thanks for your comments, because I appreciate what you offered in that. And when we had the panel discussion with some of the tribal members, one of the things that was a takeaway from me was let's not just have words, let's see actions. Let's somehow find a way to make this real. So I'd say this is a step towards that. I agree that it probably, we're not in a situation where we can have a propose or require a binding MOU or MOA. But perhaps there could be a statement of intent in our resolution to approve this project with the land bank ownership. And personally, I would like that. So anyway, I would like to see something that is showing that we really are committed and we do have an intention and we're finding our way. And it will take time. This is going to take a lot of time. So that's unusual for us to say we're embarking on something that could take 10 years. But I believe we can do it.
Any other questions or thoughts from commissioners? So just for clarification, Peggy, are you suggesting that in a motion made today, we include some language about intent? I'm having some discomfort with that because there's some thought that needs to go into that. And I'm not sure that this meeting is the time to do that. Not to say that it won't happen, but you know what I'm saying? Like to really have a discussion about the intent and how that works and how that feels to the council. For us doing that, today we need to take a simple action item to move forward with a decision of management. So I'm a little uncomfortable complicating it with trying to draft up some intentional language. Maybe that could just be me, but I think we might be complicating today's meeting. Marilyn, and then Sandy, and then Peggy.
Thank you, Krista. I just wanted to support what you just said, because while I fully agree with the ideas behind what we've just been discussing with inclusion, I think it's a very complicated and nuanced issue that we need to spend some time talking about so that we make sure that all of our concerns and the community's concerns are vetted. I personally am completely on board with everything that's been said in the last few minutes, but I think we do have a particular issue in front of us, and I don't want us to get too much into the weeds and just lose the focus of this next decision. But I completely agree with what's been said, so thank you, fellow commissioners.
Sandy?
Yes, so I've been writing some thoughts down and I just wanted to give a few of them. One to remember is that as commissioners, I completely agree with everything that's been said so far, and I am on board with the idea of furthering relationship with tribes and potentially considering working towards co-stewardship of lands. And that highlights the fact that this is just one property. So we're talking about the fate of one property, but we have properties all over that, and probably many of them have cultural significance. So I think whatever we end up wanting to move forward with in terms of crystallizing more of intentions of relationship should be more of a policy-wide and to all of our holdings, and then that gets into really the county in general. So I think it's bigger than this one property. So even if we were to sell to BLM, those overall goals and desires are still there. I think of the direction we want to move. I liked Tom Reeves' comment, and the words he used were exactly what I was thinking, and that is that this, in particular, this property that we're talking about now, this is an opportunity to build multiple bridges and learn, and from learning how to further and build a relationship with tribes, to also perhaps learning from the BLM, who has apparently a good history that the tribes are comfortable with, and so perhaps we can learn from them in that aspect. Let me just check my note here. So I think that commissioners were appointed to represent the residents of San Juan County. I feel like we have heard from many residents, mostly Lopez, that strongly advocate for us to keep the property, keep ownership. That's what I'm in favor of as well, for all of the reasons we've talked about. And I still think that we can honor and forge and be excited about this being a real motivating factor to help crystallize our relationship. I want to bring up the Madrona Institute. There was a grant given by, or a donation made some years back for the Madrona Institute to work together, the Land Bank and the Preservation Trust, to work on tribal issues. So there's many different entities in the county, nonprofit and also countywide, that are looking to move in this direction. So I feel completely comfortable that we're going to move in a direction that's comfortable with the tribes. It may be an unknown, and the BLM is known for them. That was a lot of ramble, but I think that I would like to see the land bank rise to the task, and this is perfect opportunity.
So it sounds like we are, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm getting the sense we're ready to have a motion made so that we can vote on this. And if we do that, when we do that, what I'd like to do, rather than just take a vote, if depending on what the motion is, I would like each of us to kind of, just as Sandy has kind of now, give a brief summary as to what brought you to the decision, whatever that is that you're making today. It's in past meetings that we've had with the public and with each other, it's kind of a nice way to summarize how we got to where we are. So that is what I would like to do. And Marilyn, did you have a question about that process?
No, I'm just ready to make that comment when you're ready to ask for it. Sorry.
Okay, and then, thank you, great. Nice to have someone on deck. But Asha Layla spent a lot of time on the monument process and has been a good steward of a lot of our properties. She, with permission, I'd like to take her as the last public comment before we go into the vote. Okay, Asha?
Thank you very much. So I think one of the main things that I haven't heard talked about is timing. And I think, you know, the question is, how do we really know about the future and the timing of it? All I can do is give you my experience with the BLM. And I think that it needs to pay attention to this part of it because of the enthusiasm of the support, for what happens to this property. And so my experience with the BLM, which is many, many, many years, is that everything takes so long. It has to go through so many portals of administrative okays. And if one person backs away from that okay, then it's stalled and maybe it doesn't go through. And then if you add to that, that it's all dependent, what the BLM does is who is in the current administration. Administrations can change every 4 years. And so it's like a crapshoot, so to speak. And it's like, do we really want to wait and be dependent on the process that the BLM has to go through? And I have to say has to go through to move forward on this. And then so that's the question. And that's my statement. I mean, I've been with the BLM since '92 and almost 30 years. And so we were successful only because we had an administration that was supportive of us. And then that administration changed, and we would not have gotten the monument if that had happened. So, and then there's another concern for mine that I'm just really realizing is that in our monument declaration, it was almost and totally about conservation of the parcels here in the San Juans. But from what Owen said, and I think I'm assuming this, when it got to deciding the management plan, which took more than 5 years, it got switched to recreation. So what are we really wanting to save? What do we want to have a plan around? Conservation and include recreation? Or is it recreation? Those are just sort of my, I just want to acknowledge that we haven't been talking about timing. And it's really an important issue to keep the enthusiasm of this parcel. And then just one other caveat, as you may know, I ran a monitoring program for 29 years, which is very successful in BLM. And so it would be easy to get a monitor volunteer plan for this piece of land because we love it so much. Thank you.
So Tracy and Breton, we are past public comment. I was giving Asha a golden ticket, but since we're ahead of schedule on the agenda, unless there's any strong disagreement, I'll go ahead and let Tracy, and it's either Breton or Amy. You don't know who we're getting, but if you'd like to make a comment, Tracy first, since you've not made a comment yet.
All right. Well, I read something yesterday that I want to share, and I was at the museum. So thank you, Amy, for this inspiration. From the minute that this land was being looked at by the land bank, the museum was right there showcasing the known history of this place. But this is something that really touched me. So I am reading, and you may not be able to see this, from the history of Lopez. On the cover is Lopez Hill with the pioneers, but this is very short, Krista. The Chadwicks, who we've talked about, with Adelia, who is part Esclallam, came from a prominent family in Port Townsend. They had 6 children, 4 that lived to adulthood. And in 1946, a writer interviewed one of the children, Addie, and her nieces. And I don't know if the museum still has some of this. I think they do. The interviewer concluded they love this place as if it were a person. They love it as few people in the world ever do. Love the place of their birth. So I just wanted to close that it's very touching. It's just, we're so fortunate this land is still intact with one settler's house. And interpretation of that house, even if it takes us years to look at how best to preserve what that house means, that doesn't need to be known today. And in thinking about whether the commission accepts the grants or not, or the land bank does, what if in 20 years, 10 years time, those grants, what has been in the provision is taken care of? That is something that the property has gained. The tribes also tap into that same pool of grant money. And so they understand the importance of those grants, not just for this land, but for many of their projects as well. And so by accepting those grants, that also strengthens, I think, the land bank's relationship, certainly with salmon recovery on that property. It goes into the big picture. So I wanted to leave with the history of the Chadwicks. Imagine what they would think of today, of us just loving their land as they did. Thank you.
Krista, I think you're muted, but I'm hoping you're going for me to speak. Okay. Hi, Breton, Carter. Thanks for allowing room for additional comments. This is just a personal comment. 2 points. One, I think there is a difference between a nation-to-nation relationships between tribes and government, that the San Juan County government is different than the United States as an entire country. So just to make that distinction, because it's been in conversation a lot. And I also just want to express that I think it's too bad the timing of hearing the perspective of the tribes, because that came after a lot of public input was able to be included. I think, and I sort of wonder that potentially public input might feel differently, knowing what the tribe's preference has been and has been communicated, and that can be a really good show of action. But I, look forward, trust you all with your decision, and thank you all for your time and all of the lots and lots of thought and consideration that's been put into this.
Thanks, Breton. All right, so at this moment in time, I'm ready to accept a motion of whatever kind. Marilyn, did you want to make a motion?
Yeah, I'm not prepared, but I'll think fast. I'd like to move that the San Juan County Conservation Land Bank not take the opportunity to sell this parcel to the BLM, but instead to maintain ownership.
Is there a second to that motion?
I'll second.
Thank you. That would be nice. You had me hanging there just for a second. Okay.
I was waiting for Lopez Commissioner.
Oh,
well, I was about ready.
Okay, so we've had a motion and a second. This is time for final discussion. So as I mentioned earlier, rather than just take a yay or nay or even a roll call, this will be like a semi-roll call, but I'll go around and ask each commissioner to give their vote, and maybe just, it doesn't have to be a, you know, a dissertation, just a quick summary on what got you to your vote today. And I'm going to start with Brian, or no, I'm going to start with Amy alphabetically.
Thanks, Krista. I'm going to abstain. I think it's unfortunate. I think, you know, I want to support, and I do support where the community is on this, but I think it's unfortunate that our very first sort of action is kind of contrary to what treaty tribes directly requested, and that it seems there's not a willingness to even consider a general statement of intent. And I hear everybody, and I love hearing that there is the commitment. I just don't think it sends perhaps the right message to not include anything. So I'm just going to abstain from the vote. Thank you.
Thank you. Brian?
A couple of points that strike me from our discussion and our long look at this are that the land bank has been working on this acquisition, working to preserve the Higgins property for over 2 years. So we've really taken the initiative. Lincoln has worked hard to set up 2 grants to help us acquire and maintain the property. And that's significant. And we are at a point where we have to respond to those grants, either accept them or not now. So this is the decision point. Something that I've really gotten or realized just recently, and somebody mentioned this earlier, is that the BLM is not really, has neither the authorization nor an appropriation to acquire that property now. And as I understand it, can't really even consider that before 2025, 2 years from now. So I think that it's incumbent upon us to act with what we have now to accept the property. And I think it's a real opportunity for the land bank to do a number of things, to extend the Watmough Preserve, to steward this terrific property, and most of all, to honor the clear consensus of our Lopez constituents. I think that's been really clear. I would like to say one thing in response to the statement that Amy just made about being disappointment that there's no statement of intent with this. And I agree with what Marilyn, or I guess what you, Krista, said earlier, that we probably don't want to complicate matters with doing that right now. But I would offer as a compromise that somebody might propose an amendment where we incorporate into the resolution an intent to welcome, and in my view, not just the treaty tribes, but all tribal participation in the development of this property. So I hope somebody might offer that amendment. But I strongly support the land bank acquisition of the Watmough addition.
Marilyn, would you like to amend your motion?
I would love to, because I felt that it was fairly graceless and I was expecting somebody to step in and wordsmith it for me. So thank you for the opportunity, Brian. I would like to amend the motion to include our commitment to maintain ownership of this property, to accept the grants that are offered, and to continue working toward a broad community conversation, including the tribes in our region, to discuss the best manner in which to steward and use this property. And I'd accept any additions to that because I'm not at my wordsmith best right now.
So the important thing is, if Aaron's still on the call, is you'll get that motion from the recording, or you've already written it all down verbatim.
Yeah, I got it.
Brian likes that. So I would be the next, I would accept that. Do we have to second that if we make an amended motion?
I think
Anybody
so.
else?
I think we do.
Okay.
I'll
Peggy.
second.
Excellent. It's my turn to speak. So I would say, I have come to the conclusion that I support the land bank keeping the property, but I have to admit, in full disclosure, that when we first walked that property and I looked at it, I thought, oh gosh, I hope BLM takes this, because this is a big project. I was just like, oh my God, this is, you know, the cultural significance, managing access, and then just the price tag was like, it was daunting. But since that time, we have worked through a lot of things. We looked for other partners. We pursued and successfully gained the grants. We have reached out to our community and have heard back from them overwhelmingly in support of our retention of the project or the property. And we've talked to BLM a lot. Initially, they were, you know, it was just everyone was excited to try to protect it. It became a possibility. And I believe that they are sincerely still interested and enthusiastic about the property. But and it's not all about the money, but when you have $1.5 million in your hand and you have interest and enthusiasm in the other hand, experience has shown me that sometimes that interest and enthusiasm can shift for whatever reason. And I have great discomfort in letting go of this bird in hopes that this one's going to stay in the nest long enough to get something. So, and then we had the tribes where Amy or Bree requested that the tribes give their input, and they fully supported BLM management, which I think is understandable. And I think that time was unfortunate because it kind of created a really great dilemma for me. But then I went and I sat through Bree's presentation to the land bank. I wasn't in attendance, but I watched the meeting, and she made some really powerful comments to me. These are the items that she said that we both shared as challenges, whether BLM took over the property or we retained it. We faced the challenge of the cabin, the issue of hunting, protecting tribal treaty rights, camping, overuse, public access. So she felt that those are the topics that we would both face. She highlighted the strengths of BLM and the fact that they are an entity that can create their own laws for enforcement if need be, that any environmental analysis would bring to the table many experts from many fields, that it has functional models for code stewardship, and it has established government-to-government relations. Her primary strengths for the land bank, which I think is kind of key, and I've heard this come up quite a bit, we are much more nimble and responsive than BLM has the capacity to be. They're process heavy and decision-making takes forever. That's one of the reasons she made a statement at that meeting that they're not really in a position to buy private properties because they can't move fast enough to meet the deadlines of sales and interest of owners and whatnot. So I kind of took a lot of what she said to heart there, and then looking at the work that the county has done with trying to establish relationships with the tribes, I feel that is still our biggest challenge. And I think I'll repeat the comments I made at the MAC meeting a week or so ago, that I do believe that the land bank, both of us, either land bank or BLM, could provide great management for this property. I acknowledge their broad depth of expertise and resources. And I feel that our community has a deep and sincere interest in retaining local management of this particular site, this important site. So I went from hoping it would go to someone else to worry about to fully embracing that I think we're up to the job to take it. And I look forward to working with our county people and the tribes in them bringing us along in the education process of what it means to work in collaboration, co-stewardship. So my vote would be to retain it for the land bank. So Peggy?
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, we skipped the M.
Sorry, Yeah, I saw that. Marilyn, thank you.
Thank you. I'm being kicked out, so I have to leave in a minute from this beautiful spot. I'm not going to repeat everything that everyone has said. I'm just amazed at the alignment of thought among all of us commissioners, and some of the things you have said, all of you, are the very words that I would have used. So I won't repeat them. Just the briefest comment is that Tom Reeves' use of the word bridge, to me, really nailed it for what our opportunity is here. And I believe that our land bank and our community and our county are up to this task, because we have a long, long future ahead of us in which we will be stewarding this property. And it's incredibly important to many, many people, to many of our neighbors in every way. I'm excited that we'll be able to move forward with that. And I am voting to support the motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Peggy?
Okay. So I support a lot of the comments that people have made. And I want to throw my full support for the land bank maintaining ownership of Watmough Head. And there's a couple of reasons and certain qualifications. We've all spoken to the important and unique cultural, historic, ecological, and scenic qualities. I think partnerships are going to be key to our success. And I think we've spoken to that. And I think those partnerships with the tribes, BLM, the Historical Society, and our local community are really, really important in moving forward. So it's a stepping stone for us. And I think, again, we all have mentioned Tom's comment, it's a bridge. And this is not new. I mean, I think the land bank and BLM have an established history of working together, as we do with our other partners as well. But we're taking a bigger step because this property is so unique in terms of some of its characteristics and elements, including the Chadwick House. And so I look forward to trying to work with the Historical Society to try to figure out how we can manage that in one way or another. And I think that's an important and essential partnership in that piece of it. And I look forward to working together with BLM and in private conversations with Bree, and then also, in our conversations in previous meetings. I really hope we can collaborate. I think BLM offers some really important history and relationships in terms of their established relationships with some of the tribes. And I think they can help us build those relationships. I think, and Bree actually said that in one of her letters in response to the Samish tribe. She said, "Rest assured, the BLM will partner in this effort for the long term, regardless of the decision the land bank makes right now." And so I really want to call on that commitment, because I think they've got the expertise in terms of cultural resource assessment and management, in terms of understanding protocol and more. So I'm just looking forward to having them be a strong player in the as we move forward on this property. My vision for this property is that the property is really carefully stewarded to fully protect cultural, ecological, recreational resources. That we develop really strong and lasting relationships and partnerships with the tribes and local nonprofit and government agencies. And that we also extend an invitation as part of that for the tribes to consider hosting cultural events on the property if that's of interest. So anyway, I trust we can find a way forward, and it will take time. And I think the timeline of establishing those relationships, as we heard in our panel discussion with some of the tribal members, it takes time, and we're going to have to be patient because it's a different timeline than we're used to. But I really trust that we can do it, and we'll find our way through on this. So I vote yes.
Thank you. Sandy.
Yes, I support the motion, the amended motion. And just to echo the bird in the hand and also what Brian was saying, I forget how he put it, but we're really faced, the decision here is whether or not to accept the grants. And not accepting the grants would give us a potential opportunity, perhaps, maybe someday, that the BLM could purchase the property, that we could resell. There was no guarantee there that that would ever happen. So I completely agree that accepting that, that's one aspect, that it's financially responsible to accept the grants. So that's just from the logic point. From the other standpoint, it's clear that the community wants us to keep the property in local ownership. And it is an opportunity to work with many different entities from the Historical Museum. Quiat offered some of their services. They had already worked on the property. There's just great enthusiasm. And in addition, it's a fantastic opportunity to be working towards cultural, tribal relations that we don't exactly know what it's going to look like, but we want it to happen. And so I support that amended motion. I don't remember exactly how it was worded, but I do support it. And I hope that Amy will reconsider, and perhaps, since so many people have spoken, I don't know if we need to reread it back so that she could reconsider whether she feels able to support it. And so that's it.
Thank you, Sandy. I don't want to put you on the spot, Amy, but if you're comfortable with where you stand, that's great. But I want to give you an opportunity to respond to Sandy if you'd like to.
Yeah, and let me just say, I really, truly appreciate everybody's just incredibly thoughtful comments and heartfelt commitment to move forward. It is going to take a lot of time and effort. I think there's a substantial amount of education that's needed, and I'm really glad to hear from Frankie that the county has engaged the Whitener Group. I think that's going to be really helpful. Thank you for the amended motion. As a result of that and everybody's thoughtful comments, I would be happy to support this, because Sandy, you sort of distilled it down, and the essence is, are we willing to, sorry, I have a timer going up here. Are we willing to accept these grants? And we definitely, it's in the land bank. It's in the best interest of this property at this moment in time to accept these grants. So with the amended motion on the table, I would vote aye. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for the reconsideration. Brian. So that passes. Let me just make a summary. We have 6 yeas and 1 absent. Vote on that because Mike Piggott was not able to join us. So the motion passes unanimously with those commissioners present. Go ahead, Brian.
I just wanted to add one caveat to what I said earlier, something I meant to say earlier, which doesn't change my vote or my attitude toward it. But my caveat is this. We are taking on a big management responsibility, and we're a small organization. So this goes back to a question that Lincoln answered earlier. And what Lincoln pointed out is that at this point, we have one steward for Lopez Island, Amanda Wiedow, and we actually have a part-time field assistant position, which is unfilled, I think, at the moment, but will be filled again. But we will need additional resources, I believe, and the land bank is heading into a strategic plan right now. So I think consideration of additional staff resources to manage the additional properties that we are acquiring is an essential question for us. And that we need to take very seriously. Lopez needs more help. Part of that help, and I'm going to go back to Peggy's statement about volunteerism. We have clear, strong support from the Lopez community. I hope that support will express itself in terms of volunteering and partnership and teamwork. Somebody asked the question earlier about donations. Donations certainly hope we will still have $1 million debt after this. But more important, I think, will be volunteers to help us actually manage and do projects on the property, monitor, help visitors, and so on. So I hope Lopez folks in particular will partner with us. And I hope the tribes will partner with us and the BLM as well to make this project a success. Thanks.
Thank you, Brian. All right. There's one person wanting to make an additional comment. Any other commissioners or Lincoln, do you have any words of wisdom? You already told me the best way to bicycle to Zylstra, so that was helpful.
I don't have any other words of wisdom, but I'd like to thank you all for really this incredible journey that we've come through to this decision point. It's always great to work with you all, and I think this is a good decision.
Thank you. So just before I accept this comment, I'm going to say that, well, I'm not going to say anything. I'm going to let Rhea Miller make a comment, and then if someone else has a burning desire, we're still a little ahead of schedule. We've got 9 more minutes, and it's all about the process. So Rhea, if you'd go ahead, and then Sandy.
Yeah, I just want to make a clarification about how we can move forward with tribal relationships. There are 2 avenues, and the one that the land bank can move forward to immediately, of course, is the bridging of relationships. And it's, by that I mean people to people from the land bank, for instance, to tribal members. And it's all about us learning about the various cultures. It's another form of DEIB work, diversity, equity, inclusion. We have so much to learn in that area, believe me. So that can go on right now, and it can really enhance the work of the land bank. But I have to tell you, as a person who worked with the tribes for 10 years, that the only time I had government standing was if I served on a state panel or a federal panel. And I did serve on both. And then was the only time I really had access to tribal government officials. And I know that's the case for Jamie Stevens. So both Jamie and I have a lot of experience of that. So in order to get a tribal government to make any kind of decision, that approach has to be made from a government official. It's just a fact of life. And the way that happens is your county commissioner becomes a member of a state panel or a federal panel that works with tribes, and that's your best access for building that relationship. But that does not limit in any way how the land bank can move forward with speaking with individual tribes. And finally, I just want to say, it is a morass. Anybody who makes a personal relationship, any particular tribal member that makes a personal relationship with the land bank and wants to move forward with you, that is not possible until all of them come on board and there is a government to government decision. So I just want to say you're endless opportunities, but I just don't want you to be naive about the land bank ever, or a county employee ever being to that level to get a government response from a tribal member. Thank you.
Thank you. Sandy, did you have a comment?
I have two quick comments. One, to bring up the idea based on what Rhea, I believe, just said, and that it needs to be a state representative. Someone from the state could potentially interact directly on our behalf. Could you clarify that, Rhea? Is that correct? My idea being thinking about Deborah Lekanoff.
Oh, yeah. Deborah could be very helpful in bridging that relationship. However, you just need to know she represents a particular tribe. So it would probably go through more hoops. But yes, that's a way to bring the land bank into higher profile.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that. And then I also wanted to echo Brian's concern / hope that we really address staffing matters, analysis of future staffing as we are taking on bigger projects to manage. This is huge. And so we need to have those conversations very, very soon. I know nothing will happen differently right now, but I'm looking forward in the strategic plan to see how we're straight on how that would go. I still don't think we know what it looks like, but we've been schooled a little bit. So thank you.
Thanks, Sandy. Well, you're lucky Brian's on the strategic planning subcommittee, so his voice will be heard during that process for sure. All right, so this is last call for any comments. I'm really grateful to have seen so many people attending the call, listening, commenting. I'll get to you in a minute, Amanda. It's just been very gratifying to have the interest and the support, and over the past couple of meetings that we've had with the community, which were well attended, and really heartfelt feelings were expressed at those meetings too. So I'm just grateful for the interest that's been shown in this project and the support for the commission and the staff, land bank staff, with acknowledgement of the complexity and kind of the difficulty of this decision. And I'm going to leave last words to Amanda. How's that? There's a
thanks, Krista. And I just thought I would comment, since we talked about staffing a little bit, and where we're at on Lopez. We do have the seasonal field assistant that we added 2 years ago, which has been just an immense help. And this past year, I've dedicated a lot of time to other properties, just trying to complete those projects so that my schedule could be a little bit more free. And so, what I envision, we'll still talk about what capacity is, but we'll be able to dedicate more time to this project. And it's just a really big help to know what direction we're going in. Also was kind of pausing on planning because we just needed to know what our decision was on the future. So now we can start on that long-term planning.
Great. That's right.
And thank you, everyone, for submitting public comment and participating in the meeting, and for you as commissioners.
Thanks, Amanda. So the link to those sessions that happened in early 2020, Frankie put that link into the chat if anyone wants to pop over there and grab that. And funnily enough, it was Deborah. Let's see. It was Deborah Lekanoff. Lekanoff, yeah. She's actually the one who led those 3 sessions. She was the facilitator for all of the ones that I've been watching so far. So she definitely knows where the interests are of our county, and so we'll kind of stay in conversation with her. I think she understands the priorities that are being set by our county government. All right, everybody. So happy Friday. Have a great time. Go do some gardening because your time's going to run out tomorrow. It's going to be pouring rain soon. So, and thanks again. Is it tomorrow? Sunday, maybe, whatever. Good to see everybody. Have a good weekend. Thanks for all your work and your interest. It's really appreciated. Thanks, Lincoln.
Thanks all.
Thank you, Kristen. Thank
Yeah.
you all.